Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Flores. I work on the Rados component of Ceph. Neha is my manager, and I'll let you introduce yourself, Neha, but I know you already did that earlier, but go for it.
It's me again, so that's enough.
She's back. She's back.
Yeah, and this time I'm here to talk about something bigger, broader than releases, features, and the aim is to make Ceph better, and we need your help, and we need the community to get together. So that's what we are going to talk about here. It's a new initiative, so I hope the coffee is still going and keeping you awake.
Thanks, everyone. So I'll get into it. This is the launch of the Ceph User Council. So our agenda today will be talking about the objective of this new initiative, the workflow of how we achieve the goal that we're going for, how we connected initial survey feedback from users, and the next steps, action items, and then we'll land into questions. So the objective of this is, Neha will take this one away.
I'll just talk about the objective, I promise, and then it's all Laura. We are all here because we care about Ceph, right? And we want to make Ceph better. In the past, we have done things like Ceph Days, Cephlacons to meet users, gather feedback, and also suggest improvements, right? In terms of devs suggesting improvements, users suggesting improvements, and with the common goal of improving Ceph, right? Over the years, we've also had some virtual forums like Ceph user surveys that used to happen once in a year. If long-time users of Ceph are probably aware and have filled up a bunch of them. We also did a new initiative called the user dev meetings, especially during the pandemic when we were not able to meet in person, but we still wanted to connect. Taking that legacy forward, what we want to do with the help and the backing of the foundation is launch this new initiative, which is the Ceph User Council. The idea is to get more and more feedback. We love our events, but we also want users to have a virtual forum to come to us, talk to us, and improve Ceph. So that's basically the objective here. So the goal here is it's not going to be as open-ended in terms of like the surveys we used to do, which were broad category of things. Here the idea is to capture concerted feedback that can be made into actionable items. So we start off with a couple of items that we want to focus on, particularly performance, because we all care about performance, and we can see that from the talks. And we also want to talk about orchestration and deployment, because first impression matters. Day one, day two operations need to be easy for people to adopt Ceph. So those are the two main pillars, and the idea is to have the community answer questions, tell us their pain points around these two areas. And we have started this initiative this year with the help of Vincent Su, who's leading performance from IBM, and with Matt Leonard, who's leading orchestration and deployment from Bloomberg, both part of the Ceph Foundation, who have offered to help us. They helped us design a survey that was open for a short time, so we call it a dry run survey. But the plan is to learn and improve and make this into a practice. So, with that, I think I will, let Laura talk about the workflow and how, we want to take this to the next level.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, the goal is to grow a user council with champions or leaders that are leading various pillars of Ceph. So we define these pillars of Ceph, or focus topics, you can think of it. And right, as Neha said, we want to focus on performance right away, as well as orchestration and deployment. But we also have some other examples here that we'd want to focus on. Quality is one of them, scalability, usability, and protocols like S3, as well as security. I know we have Sage in the audience for security. And there's room for many more of these. So as I go on, I'll explain what champions are going to be playing what role champions are going to be playing in the Ceph User Council. So keep in mind these pillars of Ceph, and if there are any that you would like to add or maybe champion yourself. So when we organize these focus topics and talk about what are we going to talk about at these meetings, and what are we going to have on our agenda. So to keep things streamlined, as Neha said before, we're starting with performance, and Vincent Su has volunteered to lead performance. I know we also have Mark in the crowd who might be interested in this pillar and contributing as well, so let's talk later. But this is something that we would like to focus on in these user dev meetings, as well as orchestration and deployment, which is championed by Matthew Leonard. Champions will, in these user dev meetings, help guide discussion and organize community talking points related to their respective pillars. Champions will also work with the meeting coordinators, who are Neha and me, to organize the monthly agendas. In the future, we don't plan to just stick with these two pillars. We plan to include more champions, volunteers from the community to lead any additional pillars, and again, things that I didn't even mention on the previous slide. We really want to focus on what the community is interested in. How are we collecting this user feedback that we'll be discussing? So we'll be creating surveys, either in Google Forms or something similar, to gather user feedback. The champions their role in this is to help design the survey questions around their respective pillars. So we've talked with Vincent and Matthew about this, but they helped design specific questions around performance and orchestration, since we need their background knowledge to get targeted feedback about what users are, what their performance workloads are, and what kind of orchestrations and deployments they use. The survey will then be sent out to various community forums. We've sent it out to mailing lists. We're interested in using Slack, social media, and I really want to emphasize word of mouth here, because we all have you today, and we really want to spread the word about this. So word of mouth, getting the word out about these pillars and that we need more volunteer champions. I really want that to stick in everybody's minds today. And the larger the audience at these meetings, the better. And I want to emphasize any and all Ceph users are encouraged to participate. So whether you're just an individual, or I shouldn't say just, but whether you're an individual user or a large company or organization, we want to see what your feedback is, and we want to incorporate all of that. So after we gather this feedback, we'll then be processing it and taking action. So survey feedback will be processed in data visualizations that we take from Google Forms, and we'll be analyzing the raw results of what we collect. And the role, again, of the champions will be to use their background knowledge to review the feedback and identify pain points and constructive feedback that we can talk about in the meetings. The survey results will also be correlated with the data that users have sent to telemetry. So, we already collect data about how large people's clusters are, how many daemons they have, their performance workloads, and we use that to gather inferences, and then we can correlate that with what we collect the user surveys, and say if we have differing results, we need more people to opt into telemetry. That's what that'll tell us. So after that, insights will be discussed at the user dev meetings, where the champions, users, and developers will work together to create action items about these talking points. So that's something that we hadn't done as much in the past. We would talk about things at these user meetings, but we really want to emphasize, okay, these are the pain points, here's how we take action. And the champions will help lead these discussions, but this also lies on the dev leads, developers in the community, CLT, Ceph leadership members, and users. Users are also encouraged to attend these meetings, just like they always have, to provide real-time feedback about these talking points. So maybe you answered something in a survey that you wanted to expand on, come to these meetings and tell us all about it, and help drive our discussions. So now I'll be going over, we sent out a survey, and I'll be going over the initial feedback that we received. So the goal of this survey, the overall goal of this dry run survey, as Nate has said, we wanted to focus on the two pillars, performance and orchestration and deployment. And specifically, we wanted to learn about the general performance requirements that people have and their pain points. And with orchestration and deployment, we wanted to learn about people's use cases and also their pain points. The champions, in this case, Vincent and Matthew, they helped us formulate the questions that were used on the survey. So their background knowledge there was integral in us getting the results we wanted. The survey was created on Google Forms, and it was open for 1 week. We sent it out to the Ceph mailing list to begin with. So we targeted the user list and the developer list. There is some overlap between those two populations, but to give you an idea of how many people that involves, about 149 active participants are on the user list, and about 25 active participants were on the developer list in the last 30-day window that I checked on those mailing lists. And from that population, we got a total of 27 responses. So I want to emphasize here, that's a small population. So we want to grow this and get bigger populations so that our results aren't biased in any way. But think about this first survey as helping us inform the questions that we want to ask and help us streamline things, and just to narrow, to really hammer down our workflow. So we got a lot of feedback about performance, so I'll go over what we received about workloads. Out of the 27 responses, people could choose more than one choice for all these options, and some wrote their own options. But backup and archive was the most popular choice, with 18 people responding for that. And then persistent containers and Kubernetes placed second. So that kind of tells us how people are using Ceph in their workloads from this 27-person population. We also asked how many people use replication and erasure coding. The majority actually use both, but we did get slightly more people using replication than erasure coding. We asked if people use replication, how many replicas do they use? And 3 ended up being the majority there, and other people reported 4, and that none piece is from people that only use erasure coding. We also asked if people use erasure coding, what's your EC profile? Most participants use 4+2 EC profiles, and in second place we had 8+2 and 8+3. Then we asked what kind of plugins people use with erasure coding, and this kind of ties back to what other people were talking about how Ceph has all these default configurations and people like to stay default. We did see that story play out in this question because a lot of people use the default configurations, which are Erasure. And I wanted to point out somebody specified Reed Solomon, which is the technique. That's another default choice in EC plugins. And then the 7 pieces from people that only use replication. So for more performance highlights, we asked people about their network configurations. A lot of you guys have had presentations discussing your network configurations. So I would really like to see us gather more information about this. Since this question was pretty open-ended, we got varied responses, but people gave us information about their Ethernet connections, their routing protocols. Some clusters had dedicated replication networks, some had without, and some reported unique use cases, including 2 times 10 gigabytes for client access and 2 times 40 gigabytes for backend. We also asked people about their latency and IOPS requirements, and depending on their configuration, responses were also varied. This was another open response that we can use the responses to narrow this down into more bucketed questions or more targeted questions in the future. But overall, a lot of people indicated they had no specific requirements, but when they did, they said lower is always better. That was a common theme. And then there were some specific requirements, such as 150K IOPS below 10 milliseconds latency. We asked people what their overall satisfaction was with Ceph performance in the non-error scenario. Most actually expressed satisfaction with Ceph's performance in the non-error scenario, so that was good to hear. Some noted occasional delays, for example, in database use cases and certain workloads, and some said they have consistent performance overall, with exceptions, such as slow RBD mirroring and slowness for heavy random read workloads on HPC storage. Now, during the error scenarios, we had some mixed reviews on this, and we got some constructive feedback that we can work to act on. So regarding mClock, we got some responses saying that it has helped rebalance performance in the newer releases, but users would like to see more control over prioritizing client I/O over other operations. So that kind of ties into that mClock is relatively new, and people did see a lot of things wrong with it at first, but it was good to see that even though we still would like to improve it, we've seen people agreeing that it's improved over the last few releases, which is great feedback to hear. We did see some dissatisfaction with performance during longer periods of backfill, so that's something that a lot of people mentioned that we can focus on when we have performance discussions. And then we also had some participants call out that peering degrades performance, especially in clusters with large OMAPs, and when shutting down and starting OSDs. So that was a really specific data point that we can move forward on. Lastly, for performance, we asked people what their various telemetry systems were that they use to debug Ceph performance issues. And I saw a lot of interesting responses in people's earlier presentations. So again, something that we'd like to collect more on. But popular responses were Prometheus, Grafana, and Mimir, Linux tools like IOStat, IOTop, and ATOP, and Ceph-specific tools like the Ceph Dashboard, Ceph CLI, and Ceph Exporter. And the last question we asked was, how do you decide your best practices for Ceph performance? And we were kind of surprised to see that a lot of users consult the Ceph users mailing list to decide their best practices. So that gave us, okay, maybe we need to make that more clear in our Ceph documentation. And we actually had somebody that pointed out we could use more best practices in our Ceph documentation. So we have a lot of blog posts about this, but that doesn't matter if people are not finding it and need it more in the documentation. So that's absolutely a lower hanging thing that we can immediately act on. And the other two things I'll point out, others try out test configurations on test clusters before moving to production. So that kind of makes sense to us. And then going back to the earlier question about erasure profiles, people mentioned keeping things as default as possible. So that definitely checked out with what we saw in people's EC profiles and tells a story about other configs in Ceph. Moving on to the results we got from orchestration and deployment. We asked people, how do you deploy Ceph? And we got pretty even answers about people deploying on containers and bare metal. Some use just containers like Ceph ADM and Rook to deploy. Others as their deployment target. Others use bare metal pretty equally, and then we also got about 5 responses where people use both. And then I also wanted to call out one response that was in-house orchestration. So there is some degree of people that are still using in-house. Next, we asked people if you use an orchestrator, what is your orchestrator? The majority selected that they use Ceph ADM, and then Ceph Ansible happened to be the second most popular choice. But as you can see there's a variety of choices that people use, such as Proxmox, Rook, Ceph Ansible, Salt even, Puppet, Ceph Deploy, Ceph Volume. So it's, but we do see quite a big majority in Ceph ADM. And then we asked people, what do you like about your orchestrator and what do you not like? The positive feedback we got, an overwhelming response was satisfaction with automation and ease of use, and that it makes updates and upgrades fast and easy. So that was good to hear. But we did also get some areas that we need to improve in. For instance, there were many calls for better logging and handling of silent failures to improve debugging. And then also we got a point about lack of documentation for certain tasks, such as replacing a drive. Another common one was that certain commands are too verbose and not intuitive. There are hard to debug cases when containers enter error states, so that might tie back to how we can improve logging and silent failures. And then we also got a couple comments about Rook lacking some of Ceph ADM's features, such as easy disk replacement. So that's something, this particular areas to improve section about orchestration and deployment. We identified a lot of low-hanging fruit issues there that we can really target at the next user dev meeting and take instant action on and work to triage. So that leads us to our next steps. What are we going to do now that we have this initial feedback? So first, I'll call out that I'll emphasize again that this was a dry run survey, so that we will be taking this feedback and iterating on it and getting more feedback from the champions, Matt and Vincent, to improve the questions that we're asking about performance and orchestration and deployment. And we'll also be using the feedback that we got to make the questions easier to understand, all of that kind of stuff. But with this initial feedback, with the low-hanging fruits we got about improving logging in Ceph ADM and stuff, that will be shared with the Ceph Leadership Team, and as well as appropriate stakeholders, so that we can discuss this right away, discussing action items right away in the next user dev meeting. And then we will also increase our outreach for future surveys. We would like to make more use of social media this time, such as LinkedIn and X. We'll still be targeting the mailing lists, although that encompasses more of a population of active users. So we really want to target people that are not necessarily on the mailing lists or that are not always on Slack. We want to make sure that we're getting an even distribution of very vocal active users and maybe people that are more in the background. And then again, word of mouth. If you know of anybody that has an interesting setup or something that they would, if you're just talking to someone and they say, oh, I have this complaint about Ceph, send them to this survey because we want to hear about it. Or if they have just how do they get their best practices, we want to hear about it. And they may not necessarily be on the mailing list. So word of mouth is really important here, and we're going to look into implementing a shareable invite so that you can easily forward it to anybody that might want to attend the meetings. And then we also would like to involve future champions to cover additional pillars such as quality and scalability, the ones that I mentioned earlier. And this will be volunteers from the community, all over the community. So, and that leads me to this last slide. I have some details about when the next user dev meeting is. For now, it's every third Thursday at 1400 UTC. The next meeting is May 16th, which is coming up pretty soon. We hold it on Jitsi, and I have the agenda linked there. And then really I want to highlight, if you're interested in becoming a champion in the user council and covering one of the pillars, in addition to performance and orchestration or something that I didn't list, please reach out to Neha or me over email, and we'll work with you on that. And we're really interested to see what you all have to contribute to the user council. So thanks, everybody.